So our speaker today is not Angela Patnode, who was originally scheduled and who called me yesterday morning and said she wasn't feeling well. So anyway, as I was sharing with Kathy, my wife, she said, is the theme of the month still shadow? And I said, yes. And she said, well, are you guys all familiar with Jung's bright shadow? And I said, no, I'm not. Are you making this stuff up? But she's not. And she said, I could share about that. And so for those of you who don't know, she is somebody who is really connected in really powerful ways to the bigger universe. Some of us are kind of more grounded, we're really more right here in the three-dimensional world is just really kind of present. I remember when I went to ministerial school, there were some people there that, you kind of had to just hold them down. They were ready to take off. And what was really delightful for me was they really appreciated somebody who was more grounded and could give them directions how to get to some place or whatever. Anyway, Kathy is going to tell us about understanding and working with Jung's bright shadow.
So it's working, right? Okay. Well, actually, to piggyback on what Brian said, one of my, teachers that I spent time with, she is no longer in this county. I don't know if any of you ever experienced Lawana Durbin, but she was a therapist with mental health, LCSW, and Jungian trained, and a Cherokee shaman. So I did the 13 weeks of each season training with her. And she used to say, the more deeply you have one foot rooted into the ground, the more safely you can explore the clouds, or in native parlance, that was the upper land. The middle land was what's right around us. The lower world was the subconscious, and the upper world was all the guides and so forth. So really you have to to explore the bright shadow safely, you have to have foot deep in the ground. And one overarching thought I want to begin with and share with is life as a game. I have a little book, it's a Unity-related book, The Game of Life by Florence Scovel Shinn. And just the idea of it as a game, we are meant to enjoy and enter into and not get stuck in fears or competitiveness or anything else. And I think the game was originally designed to be enjoyable, and we decided, we don't want to go with the rules of the game, we'll change the rules, and now we have to dig our way out of that. But to realize it's meant to be a game, and we have lots of resources to help us to make it be a game for us. And the game is to grow in awareness and capacity, and to be in alignment with the true path of our life as we gradually discern what that is. So we had some introduction to the dark shadow, hidden sides of our fears, our longings, our resentments, our anger, etc. The bright shadow, and by the way, I did spend 5 years on the board of Central Coast Jung Society, so that's where I'm coming from for this talk, as well as 50 years of experience. So the bright shadow are those hidden aspects of us that are talents and capacities and even superpowers, what might be called that, superconscious abilities. And there are some that are certainly well respected and sought after in society, like athletic abilities and beauty and musical talent and artistic talent if you have a way to pay your bills. Those society or salesmanship, that's one that gets well sought after, well developed. And so, but we might not be used to thinking of them as partially hidden, but they're not developed, so in that respect, they're hidden. And we might think, well, why don't we explore them all? But some reasons why we don't. For one thing, people have some subconscious memories, usually, of exploring, a talent or a capacity and having it kind of blow up. Like electricity is powerful and wonderful if you have a grounding wire and you know how to use it. Edison, he played with it, but he also said, results, man, if I gotten results. I know several thousand things that don't work. But at least he didn't blow up, but people did die from electricity. So there's that aspect of the bright shadow, is that it's powerful, it contains powerful elements, and that can be, scary, or go, I think I'm going to walk the other side of the street from that one. Our history is full of, unfortunate stories of people with a strong charisma, a strong power to lead, who then got carried away by the power of their charisma and their capacity to lead and became tyrants. Even if they started out as well-meaning revolutionaries for, the people. So there's a lot of power in bright shadow aspects. And Jung cautioned to be a little bit wary of people with charisma that aren't well grounded. He didn't use the terms well grounded. He used the term who didn't have a healthy ego, which I'll get to in a minute. So if you, and we see that, you can see that, for example, in Boris Johnson. He got bigger and bigger and bigger, inflated, and then he crashed. And we have a mental health equivalent of that, which is some manifestations of bipolar. For example, people get grand ideas and lots of energy, and they stay up all night to make it work, and then their body gets unbalanced, and they're not noticing it, and then it gets totally out of hand. They may get delusional, and they crash. It used to be bipolar people died of heart attacks, because we didn't know how to treat them. And it got to be too much for the physical body. So there is power to respect in the bright shadow, but that shouldn't mean we don't explore it, because, we're all a lot more comfortable because we have electricity, right? And because it's been harnessed and grounded and channeled. So other reasons why people might not explore the bright shadow: you can become a target. Women who are beautiful can become a target of exploitation and power that wants to own and possess them and destroys them in the process. Or athletes who, they're sought after for their athletic ability, and they develop it, and in sports like football, then they wind up later in life and they have brain injuries that make their lives impossible, and they become aggressive. They wind up in jail or something. So we have to respect the bright shadow powers. There is always some danger of self-aggrandizement if we don't know how to use the energies of the bright shadow, because they can make us, because it's energy and it makes us, think big and bold. Okay, and so most of us have in our subconscious memories of, not knowing what we were doing and actually having abused charisma or bright shadow powers, and so we're like, I'm not going there. Or, like I say, having been a target, having suffered for it from in another lifetime, so we're leery. And sometimes we just don't have a strong enough focus or desire, and it does take that to develop awareness of any shadow elements, dark or bright. So Jung stressed that in order to explore dark shadow or bright shadow, it was really valuable to have a healthy ego. Ego was not a bad term for Jung, especially healthy ego, because the healthy ego was your conscious interface with your subconscious and your superconscious, or what he would term your subconscious and your self with a capital S was his word for your superconscious or your spirit. And the healthy ego he compared to, it could be like this little cork bobbing in the ocean of all the unconscious, the subconscious and the superconscious, but it had the same moral power as the whole of consciousness, because that's how we were created. So to develop a healthy ego was really important. And what would a healthy ego mean? It would mean awareness, ever-growing awareness, knowledge of ourselves, knowledge of our strengths and weaknesses so we could avoid pitfalls. It would mean the power to focus, because you just kind of wander if you have no focus on anything. It would mean self-management of our emotions so we could regulate ourselves, of our physical bodies so we could keep ourselves healthy, and healthy management of our spiritual communication, of our communication with different aspects of ourselves. And he was a master for his time, but he fell in the pitfalls. He didn't really understand the importance of grounding also. Grounding, another word for that is healthy humility. You're connected to the earth, the humus, that helps you ground the electricity. And it really is related to electricity, because this is related to the manifestation of Kundalini energies in all our chakras. But I know you have a workshop coming that's about the chakras, so I leave that aside. And master and pioneer that he was, Jung fell into pitfalls because he didn't have a Jung to go to to help him with analysis. And the closest thing he got to it was a talented lady named Tony, which unfortunately set up, having an affair that his wife knew about, long-term affair, and it confused a lot of would-be Jungian analysts who fell into the same traps. But now we have that pretty well cleared out of psychotherapy. There's huge penalties. You lose your license if you have a sexual relationship with a client. So Jung, the great explorer, explored by falling into the pit also of experience. And to understand the game of life and play it, we need to make it be okay to have shortcomings and learn by experience. He was a great pioneer, and he fell into a pit. Okay, so if we can say that's what gifts he brought to humankind, then we can go, well, I guess sometimes falling off the cliff is part of the experience, and it's good to normalize that, to realize that now that is part of the human experience, to learn by trial and error, by feedback, and to make that okay. And if we realize that, there's a great book I suggest to clients called The Warrior Athlete by Dan Millman, and he was a national gymnast champion, and then he became a coach. And he would always, as a coach, he would never say anything negative to any of his athletes that he was coaching. He would always emphasize you just learn from the feedback. A baby learns to walk by falling over to the right and falling over to the left and falling back on its bum and falling forward on its face. And that's how they learn balance and the ability to walk. And if we can go, oh, that's natural, then that's a basis for being understanding to ourselves, to being kind to ourselves, and exploring and developing, whether it's dark shadow or bright shadow, we want a basis of being kind and understanding to ourselves, to understanding the nature of learning, and to understanding, in the word kindness is the word kin. We're all connected. And the more you can be accepting of yourself, the more you can be accepting of other people also. And for sometimes it works the reverse. The more you can understand, be accepting of other people, then you go, well, I'm part of this human race too, so maybe it's okay for me to make some quote mistakes. I usually throw out the word mistake and I just replace it with feedback. It's all just feedback. It's all information. Edison knew thousands of things that didn't work. So that kind of making it okay to learn and being kind and compassionate to ourselves, that's really one big key. And then another big key is to replace, fear and judgment with interest. I think that's the most important word I learned in hypnosis training, was interest. Isn't that interesting? If you wake up with a scary dream, instead of getting really into the fear and going, oh my God, what does that mean? Something's going to crash, the sky's going to fall, to go, wow, that was interesting. What was that about? It brings you to a whole different approach. You can enter into the game. And when you think of it as interesting, that opens the door to all kinds of helpful ideas coming to you, either from things you've read or seen on TV or hidden guides, because you've opened the door. You said, hey, I'm in the game, and then there's other people in the game to help you. So how, a little more then on ways to explore and work with both dark shadow and bright shadow, after we've made it okay to learn, natural to learn through feedback, and it's interesting. That helps us stay in the healthy ego, which is connected to the observer part of us, can key into the observer part of us, because it's like, oh, look at that, that's interesting, is one level of the observer. So it helps us key into the great observer that is our teacher in the game. So Jung's paths to exploring dark shadow or bright shadow, first of all, he said, dreams were the royal road to the unconscious. So keeping a dream journal, and there's various ways to do that. One great new bit of technology, which is its own story of bright shadow and dark shadow, is most smartphones have a record function, or you can get an app that's a recorder. So I know as I get older, if I write my dreams, sometimes I can't even read the writing. So, but you can just record on your phone, and there's inexpensive apps that then it'll transcribe it for you too. So you've got it to work with. And you just go, wow, that's interesting. I wonder what that's about. And instead of running to a dream symbol dictionary, what's really valuable is to learn your own dream language. So you go, wow, that's an interesting image. And you ponder it, and you return to pondering it, and you begin to get thoughts of what it might be about. And you go, okay, hypothesis. I wonder if this image is about X. And you test it out, and your subconscious will answer you with, it'll repeat the image, and you go, oh yeah, I see how that links up. Or it'll give you, if you're, if the guess wasn't accurate, it'll help more guesses come to you. So it's very useful and important to learn our own communication with our own psyche, our subconscious and our superconscious. That comes to us often through images. So playing with images is useful. Now, if you're somebody who has a hard time remembering dreams, another way to play with images from the unconscious, and I've brought lots of my favorite toys here, favorite, books that are descriptions of how to play the game, and some toys also, is there's many card decks that are about exploring the psyche. The oldest, most classic one probably is the tarot, that probably goes back to early Egyptian times, way back, as a set of images that represent stages on the journey of any exploration, from starting out with the Fool card, beginner's mind, the learner, ready to fall over, through connecting to male and female, earth and sky, wisdom, falling in love, having events happen, growing, developing attributes you need, arriving at some level of mastery, the world, the sun, and then starting over again with another cycle, many cycles. So, that's just one example of a card deck. You pick a card and as a daily practice and reflect on what it says to you. And I was just seeing a scroll through the headlines recently, some experimental physics department, somebody was setting up a study to study, because see, it's in experimental physics now that they're really exploring consciousness. You'd think it'd be in psychology, but they're kind of stuck in everything is in the brain. Okay, which it's not. So the experimental physicists don't necessarily have that same viewpoint, because they've tried everything they can to explain the universe, and it's just so convoluted that they're now exploring, well, maybe consciousness is a variable because of the observer effect, how waves of light wind up being photons that are like particles when consciousness observes them. It's strange and wonderful, and it's been around. It's been noted for 125 years, but we're having trouble actually accepting the implications of it. So now there are experimental physics departments where that's being done. Anyway, this is going to be a study on correlations between intention and synchronicity. And Jung coined the term synchronicity for meaningful coincidences, that couldn't be explained otherwise. And if you didn't want to be, called insane, you just said, oh, well, they're coincidences. But now you don't have to be so afraid of being called insane, because now they're starting to explore. There's a real connection between intention and what happens. So, we live in an exciting time of the game. Okay, so all levels of exploring dreams and images. And, some people have some capacity for lucid dreaming. Actually, about half of people have experienced a lucid dream, which is being awake in your dream, which, if you can cultivate that, is wonderful way to explore. So there's a great book on lucid dreaming back there, out-of-body experiences that happen spontaneously or in dreams of flying. They're like precursors to that. So it's an exciting game to explore. A lot of work done with that at the Monroe Institute. So the book on out-of-body experiences is the best one I've seen on that, and it comes out of a guy who was very active at the Monroe Institute. Or Jung would also explore dark shadow and bright shadow through active imagination. And that meant really exploring a dialogue between your conscious mind and whatever was presenting itself from the subconscious or the superconscious. So ways we can explore that. One great one is, it was popular for a while, the Progoff journaling process. Progoff wrote a book on kind of systematic journal writing and including dialogues. See, you would write dialogues back and forth from the point of view of your aware consciousness and then the point of view of whatever the element was. Another person that you had a relationship with, or some part of your body, or a dream image, or some event that happened. And by really entering into a quiet meditative state in the journaling, it would be surprising when you wrote from the other point of view what appeared on the paper, but you could get insight from that. So, that's a way of working with different elements of us. Lady Lucia Capiccioni, she wrote a book on, but I don't have hers, but I'm mentioning it, on writing with a non-dominant hand, because that is connected to, usually to the right brain, and so information that you didn't know will come if you can connect to letting your non-dominant hand write. For me, I'm too impatient, so I couldn't do that. But another approach is kind of semi-automatic writing on a keyboard of your computer. And it's always useful to ask for the guidance and protection of your higher self or your spirit, and also ask it to handle the whole process of, I want to say the employment director, of choosing any guide for you and vetting that guide and making that guide safe for you to work with. So you always want to connect, even if you don't have an image of what your spirit or your higher self is, by intention and request. It's no dummy, it knows what you need and it helps you out. It just needs for you to ask. So that's ideas for working with active imagination. And then now we know that the body is another great source of information for us. So mind-body communication. Ailments are part of the language of our body, and we really can learn, again, by just learning to focus, pay attention, and dialogue with, like, I have a finger that got arthritic, and as soon as it had my attention, really had my attention, it said, "Stop pulling weeds and I'll stop hurting." It doesn't want me to do the gardening anymore. It says, that's not what you're really here to do. So, okay, hire somebody to pull the weeds and do what you're meant to do. So, that's just one example. And there are people who do all kinds of energy work with the body. I just brought a thing of cards that are energy exercises from the blonde lady whose name at the moment I forget. Yes, Donna Eden, right. Okay, and then I think for me the system that was most important to learn, just to manage my body and then to manage a lot of other things, was self-hypnosis. And there's a lot of good books on, or just information online on learning self-hypnosis. Self-hypnosis really consists of just learning to quiet the body, mind, and then learning to focus somewhere in a question. And you can do many things with self-hypnosis, and it's another place where our phones can be a great assistance to us, because if you find directions for self-hypnosis that feel good to you, you can read them aloud onto your phone, record them, and use those as your hypnotist, so to speak. You're hypnotizing yourself, but you're working. You're focusing on relaxing and taking in the suggestions that are being played back to you from you on your phone. So you know that you're all in control of the process because you did the whole thing. So reprogramming ourselves is really important, and it does take repetition, because we have thought our negative thoughts and beliefs and feelings millions of times, because every time, once we had an impression, that formed a film on the glasses of our mind, and we saw events through that film, and so they became proof and evidence that our negative belief was true. So to undo that does take a lot of practice and focus. Fortunately, there are ways to auto-program that, so it doesn't, you don't have to spend all your time on it. But it is very useful that your suggestions to yourself and your affirmations, that you record them and you hear them, as you're falling asleep. That's a very useful part of self-programming. And ritual can be very valuable in that also. I was with a group of women this week, and we were doing an equinox ritual, and composting or burying a thought or belief that we knew we wanted to leave to the old year, because this was the beginning of the astrological new year and the indigenous, in many places, new year. And it was, the new year for everybody until 1582, when we adopted the current Gregorian calendar. So we were, burying, and doing something physical is an image that helps your subconscious get what it is you want it to do, because it responds to images. One of my favorite books that I share with everybody, Taming Your Gremlin, is about, it's about using mindfulness, but it's about then using cartoons, making your own little cartoons. You don't have to be an artist. You just draw any funny cartoon that represents a tape that you want to be aware of, so it's not running the show anymore. And that's how you tame a gremlin. So anyway, I brought lots of, like I said, resources. Hopefully after our service, you can flip through them. If you find anything that resonates with you, take a picture of it or write down the information. Most things you can get, through Amazon Books. You can get them at reduced prices, or if you just Google half-price books, there's other ones. So there's lots to play with in the great game of life. So enjoy bright and even interesting dark shadows.